All right, good evening. It's 7:02. We're at the EMS building, February 28th for our town meeting, informational meeting. Tomorrow, voting will take place, Australian ballot, here at this building from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Open all day. At this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Polly Rico, who we're generously gonna allow her to take the lead tonight, seeing it's gonna be her last night as a member of the select board. And we appreciate all the years of service she has done for us, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thanks, Larry. So I'm going to share my screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple of items here. Let's see. And can you folks see that at home? Okay, good. Thanks, Denny. So I'm going to start with going through the warning, and then I'm going to go through the revenue budgets and the general fund budget. And then I'm going to go through the road revenue and the road budget. And then we'll open it up for questions. So if you have any questions as we go through, just take note. And then when we open it up, you'll have your question. Okay, so I'm going to start. Okay, so as you can see, the warning, as Larry pointed out, that tomorrow is Australian ballot. I'm sure everybody's looking forward back to when we can get back to town meeting in person, but this year it'll be by Australian ballot, and that's here from 10 to 7. And then Article 1 is to elect the following town officers: moderator, select person for 2 years, a select person for 3 years, and 3 members of the town forest. Each of those are 1-year terms, and a collector of delinquent taxes for 1 year. So that will be on your ballot. Article 2, to see if the voters will appropriate the following sums of money. These have always been on our warning. These Enosburgh entities in Article 2. Article 3 are the voters will appropriate the following sums of money, and then these are the agencies that have requested appropriations from the town. What was it, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? We put in a stipulation that if you had been grandfathered into asking Enosburgh for appropriations, you were allowed to be in the book. And then 3 years ago, might have been 2.
Dan Cunningham helped.
Yeah, I'm losing track of my time. 2 or 3 years ago, anyway. We instituted that by petition, could you add your name to this list? And we did that as a result of the appropriations were getting a little bit out of hand. We were expending kind of a lot of money towards different agencies, some of which Enosburgh didn't directly benefit from. So as a result to kind of curb that spending a little bit, we instituted a petition to add yourself to that list. So you can take a look at those. These are all in the book, by the way. Article 4. This is the article that allows the select board to expend the amount of the budget to meet our expenses and liabilities from the general fund. Article 5 is to see if the voters will allow the exemption from taxation for the Lincoln Lodge, the Masonic Temple on Missisquoi Street for a period of 5 years. Article 6 is to conduct any non-binding business throughout thought proper when met. And then the road district, Article 1 being to expend the amount of money needed for expenses and liabilities for the road district. Okay, so maybe I'll open it right now. Are there any questions regarding that warning? If so, you can just raise your hand or you can type it in the chat.
I think there's a hand there.
Oh, Sharon. Jesse's gonna, who is running for select board? Oh, great question. So as Larry pointed out, I'm now not running again after close to 10 years of being on the select board. I am hanging up my hat. So Jessica Eagles is actually running for the select board. She has been a member of the planning commission and the development review board. She took the same course I took as far as how to get here. And she's going to be running. And she's the only person who turned in a position to be on the ballot.
And Pierre's also up and
Yes, sorry.
he's rerunning unopposed.
Correct.
There's still a hand.
Yeah, Sean had another, but Sharon had her hand up.
Oh, Shauna, yes, we're gonna get to the Armory in just a second. Okay, so if there's no questions on the
I think
warrant.
Sharon,
Oh, Sharon, sorry.
She's unmuted, so.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
yes, we
Yes.
can.
Okay, I just have one question. Why aren't we having a town meeting day at the school? I don't know why we aren't. Why aren't we?
So we had to decide when to post this warning back in early February, and at that time, COVID numbers were still really high. And to have, I know. And then also to have it at the school has a mask mandate for the school. And so that would require everybody to do that. We were hoping to have it at the Armory, but the Armory is not done in time. So with the numbers of the way they were, we decided to have it Australian ballot for just this year.
So we're never going to go back to having a regular town meeting day. Is that what you're saying?
No, I said just this year.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, just this year. And then next year, hopefully we'll be back in person.
it's definitely very unfortunate, but as you all know, especially this area in Vermont was hit really hard here in January and
Thank you.
Point.
Any other questions on the warning before I move on? I think I'm gonna move on to
I don't know. Okay, no.
the selectmen's budget requirements. And so this is just a broad overview of all the numbers, which I'm gonna dig into deeper as we go. So the general fund revenue and expenses, like I said, I'm gonna get into that in a second. And then the proposed amount to be raised by taxes. And you can see that this current tax rate is 0.416 and last year's tax rate was 0.390. Proposed highway budget, again, these are the numbers. I'm going to show you those more specifically in a second. And you can see this year the tax rate went down in the highway district, and last year's number was 0.529. And then also these are the values on the grand list as well. Okay.
Probably should also let them know that we were very close to being reassessed.
Yeah, so, and correct me if I'm wrong, Billy Joe, because I could be misspeaking, but, you know, due to property values having significantly increased across the state, we are very close to being reassessed. Is that correct?
It is true. We missed it just like here this year.
Yeah, correct. So if property values continue to rise, that could be in our future. Okay, so next I'm going to go to, let's see. Okay, so this is the general fund revenue. This is the money coming in. And you can see, well, the good news is it's slightly higher from last year. I'm going to actually, before I do that, I'm going to jump. I'm actually going to jump to the letter that was in the beginning of the town book, and then I'll go to the budgets. So this is also a brief overview. The letter in the beginning of the town book, I believe it's on page
Three.
Page 3. It basically kind of talks about what we've been doing and some of the increases and decreases. So the first paragraph, which speaks to Shauna's question, is about the Armory. And it basically says, for those of you that don't know, we acquired the Armory from the state of Vermont for municipal purposes. And over the course of the year, we've had that building assessed for needs and renovations. We've been working with Northwest Regional Planning Commission around hazardous materials in the building, what it basically is going to take to get that building habitable for us. So we are currently in the renovating phase and hope to move in soon. It's also part of the vision to have the Enosburgh Community Center. It's no longer at the Monteith House. It is going to move over to the Armory. So the community center and our rec director will be there, as well as our zoning administrator, our listers, our town clerks, and I said zoning. I don't know. I know I'm missing stuff. And assessor. Thank you. And so let's see. It is our hope that during the non-binding business section of this meeting, so at the end after the budgets, to gather input from Enosburgh residents regarding possible use of the space. But again, keep in mind that per the agreement with the state, that it's to be used for municipal purposes only. So I'm going to show you in a second, but I'm just going to hit on these real quick. The salaries line was increased in the general fund. That is due to salary increases that fall in line with regional comparisons. You know, we took a hard look at what our employees are making and how they compare to the towns around us. And in order to kind of keep employees, valuable employees, sometimes you have to get a little competitive with the salaries. They're not huge increases, but they're enough to put us in line with that. Another contributor is the increase to retirement system for our employees. So we haven't in the past had a retirement system for our full-time employees. And we have some employees here that are 20, 25, almost 30 years. Joey, are you 30?
Yeah, 34.
34 years, exactly. So, you know, it became, I mean, it's been apparent for a while, but we took the jump in order to have a retirement system for those employees. So you're going to see a little bit of a jump in that salary line. Another budget increase is the building repair line, the building that we're in right now, the Enosburgh Emergency Services Building. Many of us can remember when it was built, but that actually was a long time ago. So it needs some pretty significant repair and some paving for the parking lot. You'll also notice an increase in the per capita rate for the ambulance services. The town increased this rate for all our contracted towns, and the Enosburgh residents are no different. So in order to keep that service viable, we lost a lot of revenue due to COVID, which I'll speak about in a second. You know, between running that ambulance, the per capita rates had to go up. So in order to offset that increase for Enosburgh, because it was some of that loss was related to COVID, we're going to use some of those ARPA funds, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, to offset the increase for Enosburgh taxpayers. So even though the number is increased, you won't feel that. The expense for the police contract is increased. This is a scheduled increase. It was a multi-year contract, so this was a scheduled increase. A decrease would be the conservation fund line. This line was approved by the voters 5 years ago, and we are now at the point where that's expired. And then you'll see on the revenue budget that I'm going to show you in a second, you're going to see those ARPA funds that I was just talking about. So it's based on population, and you know, Enosburgh is unique and not unique at the same time in the fact that we have a village and a town. And so the state of Vermont decided to award those ARPA funds separately. So the village got some funds based on their population, and the town got some funds based on their population. And so there are the amounts. We received some in 2021. We're also going to receive some in 2022. Currently, Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns and Vermont Regional Planning Commission have said to kind of like slow your paying out of these funds until you get better guidance about what these funds can be used for. And they basically said at this point, you should probably hold off from spending a great deal of it just because they're really even not sure where and how this money can be spent. So you're going to see there's a good chunk in the revenue, but at this point, we're not expending it. We do have up to 3 years to expend that money, however. And I said I would like to, we hired a new rec director, Margot Longley. Okay. Larry or anybody, do you want to add anything about any of those points?
Just on the ARPA funds there,
Yeah.
because it's 2 different municipalities, but the ambulance is through the general fund as one. We had to request to the trustees for their share of the ARPA funds that put towards the ambulance share with our portions, and they generously accepted. So that's the one, like Polly said, it's kind of a little different the way the state handed it out. So in instances like that, we have to request, because it's not our funds, it's in the village's hands, to put it towards the ambulance. And we also were able to renew some contracts with some member towns for the ambulance, and they were able to utilize ARPA funds as well too. So it's really, even though it looks like the huge increase per capita for the ambulances, it's pretty much level funding by using to the taxpayers by utilizing these ARPA funds.
Okay.
You guys have a couple of questions.
Couple of questions, okay.
First one is Dan Steiner.
Oh, okay. Hi, Dan, you want to go ahead with your question? Okay. Dan, did you have a question? No? I noticed there was another question, and that was Dennis. Oh, why was the conservation budget not reintroduced? So as the town, as the select board, we basically receive petitions that people go around and ask for these funds, and no petition was presented to us.
The last petition was a specific time for 5 years, and
Correct.
2021 was the last year to send into that fund. We currently have, I think, close to $100,000 in that fund.
Yep. Close to him. Right.
I mean, something like that, if it was worded differently to get a fund started, and it would have to be next year, somebody would have to petition and put it in to raise it to a specific fund. Like when we took money for the Doughboy, we've got this fund, a conservation fund, where we have $100,000 taxpayers' money already set aside, but we can't grab that to help pay for the Doughboy or instances like that. So it'd be better if there was a more broad fund was set aside. So when you get asked like that during the year and we didn't have it in the budget, well, we have this fund that we can actually pull from. So just thought going ahead.
So it sounds like Dan wanted to speak. Oh, sorry. Dan wanted to speak. Dan, if your mic's not working, there are 2 things you could do. One, you could close out and come back in and see if that worked, or you could type your question in the chat, which is located. If you hover at the bottom, there should be a chat option.
Dennis had one more.
Okay,
question as
Dennis,
well.
let's see, what is your question? Dennis?
Who is eligible for the town retirement, and will it be retroactive or start at the passing of the budget if passed?
Yeah. So currently our personnel policy states that the people who receive benefits are the full-time employees. That obviously could change if the select board decided that they wanted to alter that. But that's how the personnel policy reads right now. And oh, will it be retroactive? I believe it starts from this budget. I mean, that's what you're approving on this budget is going forward.
It's with Vermont League Cities and Towns also, and it's a specific percentage that they have to add in. Usually some places will have like 1 to 5% match, but it's a 5% match. So it'll be up to the employee whether they accept it or not.
Was there another one?
Yeah, so Ward has his hand raised next.
Okay, Ward, would you like to ask your question?
My turn?
Yeah.
Isn't there money left in the conservation fund? I may have missed it when that was just being talked about.
Larry
Is there
just,
money left from the 50,000 or so?
it's like 100,000.
100,000.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, and it's just sitting there.
And we cannot, with the language that was put on it, that it cannot be used for other specific funds other than conservation or land, and it has to be approved by
The voters,
also the voters, and has to go in front of the conservation board.
correct. So the conservation board, so if that money wants to be used, it goes before the conservation board and then they bring it to the voters to see if they can expend that money.
Have they provided any explanation why they have not been able to use the funds?
I was not aware they couldn't use the funds. I don't think anybody's asked to use the funds.
Nobody's requested it.
Sure, we got a very nice, not large chunk, but we got some money when we put our land in the Vermont Land Trust. We got some money to pay the investment we had to put in for the monitoring long term. I've been struck that fund has not been advertised to the public. It's not shared with people, and now we've stopped it because nobody's getting the money. Somebody doesn't seem to me, seems to me there's some lack of management on it.
It's in the annual report and it's in your, every single year as a line item. And voters have voted on it every year.
Isn't it?
It's specific to conservation.
Right.
No,
it's
nobody's
something-
listed. it's
But
listed
I
in
think
the,
the, so,
our
yeah,
website.
that point taken for sure.
Conservation people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
If there were anything one could do to help nudge that along, I know we'd be grateful. We think it's a great idea to have resources that we're investing in the future.
Yeah, I would think your first stop would be the conservation committee. I'm sure that they would love to have that conversation about
Sarah Downs
Sarah Downs. is
chairs
the
that, I
chair.
believe.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay, at this point, do I see any? No? Okay. Okay. So we're gonna go through the revenue, the general fund revenue. And as you can see, those ARPA funds that we were talking about, that was in that letter, is located at the bottom for the amount received. And they're trying to look at the revenue as far as significant increases. And there really aren't a whole lot. Some decreases, a little increases, but you can see the revenue is holding its own.
I guess there is a blank on the loan repayment on the ambulance, and by having the increase with all the member towns in this new contract, we're hoping that there'll be some revenue each year going back into there.
Right. Okay, and then so now I will go to the general fund. And again, you can see there's those slight increases for the town salaries that I was speaking of. And when your salaries increase, obviously your social security and your insurances increase as well. Let's see, the other line that I was talking about, again, we saw that police contract, which is an increase, but as I said, it was a multi-year contract, so it was scheduled. Where is, these lines make my eyes go fuzzy. Oh, and then town buildings, utilities, and general expenses went up slightly.
There is one for repair down here.
Is there?
Building repair. 100.
Oh, yes, okay, yeah, so you can see, as I said in the letter with the emergency services building needing some pretty significant repair, including paving. And if anybody's ever checked out, that was one of the most shocking things as a select person that I saw, is the amount of money it costs to actually pave something. So you can see that number has gone up pretty significantly to repair those buildings. But other than that, everything else is slightly or under.
That's also good. The Armory's.
In that
Repairs
line
and-
as well, the armory is in that line as well, yeah, okay. Okay, and so now I'm gonna go to the highway, the revenue. Oh, Shauna has a question, okay. Shauna, you wanna ask your question?
She wrote it.
Oh, she did, I'm sorry.
Will the economic development coordinator position be replaced?
So, let's go back up to, right there, okay, so if you can see, it says economic development and grant expense is $13,000. At this point, that money in there is to, pay for any freelance grant writing that the town sees fit. So the idea at this point in time is to hire freelance grant writers as the need arises. And then some of the economic development responsibilities we have found that can be picked up by the zoning administrator. So that's where we are at this point, is to divvy up those two things through those lines.
Just wanted to make a quick note on that. It was kind of unfair when we hired Sean at the time, because the pandemic hit and it was hard to give guidance for that position, and it was hard to watch and see what's going on. So we'd like to be able to get moved into the Armory with their space already provided in hand before we look at another full-time position.
Right.
And we will have a plan for them at that time. So it's kind of, I think, patchwork this year.
Right. So that, yeah, so that's not the end all be all, but that's where we're at right now as far as expending money for that. Oh, Dan, did you want to ask a question? Is he not on the phone?
Can he call on the phone?
Can,
Now skip it.
first come, first serve, preference to town grants versus village grants. Oh, as far as like grant writing, that's kind of a good question. I mean, I would think, when Sean was in place, we did ask different departments and groups to basically come up with a plan so that we could see what their needs were ahead of time, so that we could, when grants came up, we would kind of be prepared for when they would come up. I personally, this is not the board speaking, this is just me speaking, I think that's a good idea, that if every group or entity that wants to tap into grants had kind of their list of priorities, then the town would know who wants to go for what. But if anybody else wants to chime in, that's fine. I am seeing it, so did anybody else know, are you wanting to say
I can't
anything?
see it.
Oh, so this one says the position prior was for both village and town, correct? With those who need a grant, come to the select board then.
It wasn't for, it was more for the municipal, like the Opera House, municipal branches, but we were, I think, had some guidance for some personal business, but it wasn't
So,
to fund it all.
right, so economic developer was a town position, had always been a town position, so they would always come to the select board. Sometimes our, Sean, our economic developer, would help people for the village go forward with those. But yes, it would come before the select board, yes. And so I guess I would say it would also go to the village if it was a village grant.
Bingo.
Yeah, yeah. So if it's a village grant, you need to ask permission from the village if you can apply for the grant, because they'll be the applicant. And if it's a town grant, you would come to the select board to ask if the town wanted to be an applicant. I hope that was clear. Sorry. I kind of talked in circles on that one, but I landed somewhere. So anything else? Let's see, no? Okay. Dan, again, if you want to type your question in the chat, I'm not sure what's up with the microphone. Okay, so I'll keep going with the road revenue, where there is a decrease, obviously, the FEMA flood money, you know, we received a good chunk of that from the October Halloween flood. The year previous, obviously, we're not getting that money again, nor do we want another flood. So then we're going to go into Joey, did you need to say anything about the revenue side?
Do you want to be talking about the changes?
No, I think she. 'cause she
I
has
have
right
the
side.
right one. So
Okay.
yeah.
She just asked me if there's something that you want.
Oh, yeah, we should mention,
Oh. correct.
though, in the town report, on page 24 and 25, the revenue and expenses are incorrect. The wrong pages get sent. But in the beginning, what's asked to be raised, the warning and stuff is correct. Billy Joe is gonna have some copies tomorrow for anybody that comes in and wants to look at them. And Polly's gonna put on the screen the correct one. So if you open your book up, page 24 and 25, there's gonna be a few numbers that are not gonna look the same to what you're seeing there on the screen.
However, in your book, the tax rate on that second page is correct. Those numbers are correct. So this would be the page that would have slightly differences. So, is that Shauna ES?
No, there's
Ellen Stanley.
Ellen Stanley. Sorry, Ellen. So it says what you're saying is you would fund a grant writing for a village grant as long as the village trustees wanted you to apply for it, or are you saying the village needs to invent their own line item for grant writers?
Oh, it comes out of general fund.
Yeah,
We were,
it's
yeah,
so
the
general
trustees
fund-
advise us,
Right.
the grant, or, they have this viable grant and they want funding
Right,
for
'cause
it.
the general
They
fund-
approach us to give the funding.
Because the general fund is both the village and the town. So yes, it would be very helpful if the details of the grant writing freelance position were, oh yeah, no, for sure. Yep, this is just basically putting money in there before, you're putting the cart before the horse, Heather. We haven't even gotten there. This was just basically allotting the money to do that. Yep. That would be definitely the next phase. And Heather's question was that we would have to put some kind of job description to that position, and absolutely. So I'm gonna get to the highway expenses. So Joey, you wanna, I didn't put your report up, but do you wanna tip me some up to any big changes? I
I
don't
don't really
think
think there is any.
there
big
aren't any.
changes. Not really.
No, it looks like, again, remember I made that comment about paving? Yeah, well, so you can see there's definitely an increase in the paving budget, the paving line. There's also an increase in the equipment, lease, fuel, repair. Fuel prices are now going up, so we need to allot for some of that. But everything else is, let's see, there's the contract and work and bridges that went up slightly. Actually more than slightly. No, went up slightly.
Yeah.
By 25.
20,000.
Yeah. So everything else, more winter sand. Thank you for that when the roads get icy. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of big changes in that budget.
You may look at the salt and sand shed
Oh,
expense
yeah.
line there. Seeing in 2021 that we had 160,000, but we only expensed 10,000. We're asking for 160 again. Well, that's an ongoing, I think, year 5 or 6 years now, trying to get a salt shed put in. And we were all set to go a couple years ago when the pandemic hit, and the prices escalated way beyond our budgets, and we've had 2 bidding process going on, and unfortunately, the bid process was right in the middle of us doing budgets, so we didn't know. We were kind of guessing if this is gonna happen this year or not. And it turns out we had to reject all bids, but now we're pursuing another avenue. So it may or may not be utilized this year, so up in the air, because if we had accepted the bids, the town would have to pay $500,000 with 2 big grants. So we felt that was not the best choice. When originally we were supposed to be spending around $160,000 to $180,000. Thanks to the pandemic.
So the question is, what roads are slated to be paved this year?
What was supposed to happen last year was the west end of the Tyler Branch Road from Duffy Hill intersection to the first bridge. We're supposed to have done that last year pending getting some repairs done on the bridge, but we're unable to get a contractor on board to do those repairs to the bridge, so the paving had to be put on hold. So that's planned to be done this year, and there'll probably be a section of the Tyler Branch Road with our resurfacing money to do some shim and overlay on that. The Tyler Branch Road, which is of the existing paved portion of it already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So some of it's resurfacing,
Some of it's resurfacing existing and some of it's paving some dirt.
paving some dirt based on if you can do that construction.
Right.
Yeah.
You may want to just let them know how much it costs to do a mile of paving.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
true.
that's why we don't do a lot
well,
of paving.
I don't really know, but yeah, it's well over $100,000 just to shim and overlay a mile of road, which when you do a piece of dirt road, well, you put on even more pavement because you have to put a base and then a top. So you end up putting like 4 inches of pavement. So
So a mile for 100,000 on a overlay.
yeah.
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 So, yeah, like I said.
So like our
shocking.
$100,000 resurfacing budget, we'll probably do just under a mile, probably not quite a mile.
Under a mile. Yeah.
Depends upon the price per ton when the time comes.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to the end of that. So I'm gonna ask if there are any more questions on the budget before we move into non-binding business, which would be that Armory conversation or anything other questions you might have. Okay, good. Okay, so now let's move into the non-binding business. So if anybody has a question, they can put it in the chat or raise your hand or speak. Okay, we've got one in the chat. Where do Armory expenses fit into the budget? So as we pointed out, let's see, on the, right here, that line that we have right here for the, oh, that's Opera House.
They're below it.
Where am I?
Town building repair.
Town building repair. Oh, that line is hazy right there. 100,000, right, from 29. We were talking about emergency services building, some paving of the parking lot, and then the Armory renovations would be in there as well. We have utilized, I should say, we've utilized some grant funding, some pretty significant grant funding through the Brownfields project. And this is around asbestos abatement, all the contracting, the engineering to determine what is hazardous materials. What else? Is that it? Yeah.
We should add too that, I'd like to thank Jesse for definitely stepping up and helping out at the Armory where he can, and especially in January when it froze up, nobody was in there. The circulators weren't running and it froze up and there was enough damage, but he was able to make the calls and get the people there to line things up.
Is there a breakdown? I don't know if there isn't a breakdown.
We don't have final numbers to do a breakdown.
Right, I mean, I can tell you for just asbestos removal, which again is being grant funded, is 17,500. We are purchasing new windows and new flooring. I think that, and we're putting in a door to the vault and new lights
The flooring is only in the
in
office,
the offices, not.
not the big floor. That's up
Correct.
for later discussion of what we're gonna do in that room.
Yeah. But as far as like an itemization, there isn't one as of right now, but those are the things that are,
We are going to get prices on things like for future, for the flooring and stuff,
Right.
so that the next time we meet, we'll have some
Hey,
numbers
Some
to
numbers.
decide what to do in the big room.
did you hear Billy Joe say that? Can you hear her?
Who's
Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you.
word?
I didn't want to have to repeat, yeah. Any other questions?
Boards is-
Oh, let's see. Has there been any more discussion about what to do with the current office building? So far, we have discussed with the village. If you had any, somebody not muted?
Me.
Oh, sorry, it's Ward. Okay, hold on, Ward, I'll get right to you. So we have talked with the village. The village is also in support of potentially tearing it down and making it a parking for the library. So that has been on the table. Again, that building was deeded to us for municipal purposes only, and it needs a pretty significant amount of work. But anybody else want to speak to that?
No, I've been approached from several people in municipalities in Enosburgh saying they thought, they hate tearing buildings down, but this would really be a good place to do it, to allow the library to be seen and give some much needed parking spots in the area, which Enosburgh is definitely lacking of. Mike LaRose, if you're aware of, has bought the train set, I guess, and he's approached us he's gonna move it out, but I told him there's no hurry right now because we're not gonna be doing anything with that building until we get moved into the Armory, and then we'll probably, might take some poll, send out some postcards or something, and see what the residents feel the best use for the lot is before we do tear it down, but if that is what we're gonna do.
Right. We have,
So Ward, I think, had his hand up.
Ward had it.
oh yeah, Ward. Yes, I did. Yeah, sorry. Now you know how my class runs. Oh yeah, Ward. Yeah, what did you have to say?
He's muted.
Oh, you can unmute now. Unmute yourself.
We can't hear you, Ward.
No, he's still muted. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. This may be a little bit of a speech, but I'd like to riff a little on Enosburgh, using as a starting point, one of my favorite philosophers, Yogi Berra. I hope most of you know who he is. He's reported to have said that if you don't know where you're going, you probably won't get there. And I have for a long time, having been trained as a planner, in education. I, for a long time, have been concerned that our town is not thinking adequately about the future. And things have only gotten worse in the last few years, but there's changes in agriculture. There's possibilities or changes in tourism. We look for businesses to come in. Do we have manufacturing? What kind of a town do we want to have in 20 years? I now see that we have close to $1 million with significant flexibility in how we spend it. And we have unstaffed professional money for professional planning activities. I think we're missing a very, very big chance if we don't think together with the village about what Enosburg should be like in the next 20 years and take advantage of the positions we've already created and the resources to support them. And think carefully in the next year or so how we're going to spend the $1 million or so. There's one at a time picking pieces off. A parking lot in front of the library may be a good thing to have, but it may not be a good thing to have. It depends what kind of town we want.
We want a bigger library. I want to pitch that in, a bigger library.
You
would be
see, you
great.
got one.
I'm with you.
There's only,
I think we need to have a process that allows the people who want more books to talk to the people who want more shopping opportunities and the farmers who'd like to keep milking cows. And I don't see that anywhere in the picture of the thinking that we're doing now. And I'd be happy to contribute whatever my experience might contribute to that. And there are others of us who've been doing some of that, but I think we need some leadership from the elected officials to work on this. That's my speech.
Thanks, Ward.
just a quick note on our town building right now, or our town clerk's office. There's only two choices. Either you leave it or you tear it down. And you only have minimal use that you can do. You can't put a business in there because the municipal work. So that's a short plan, short vision there. And I know you're saying things have gotten worse last 3 years. I think it's been more like stagnant for 10 years, maybe. Because you go 10, 15 years ago, probably 10 years ago, we had caps on our buildings because everybody was building houses here. And now we're, so it goes back more than just 2-3 years. Agriculture, I think, is evolving differently. Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely need a overall picture of how things should proceed.
So Dennis can you speak to the tax-free proposal for the Masonic building?
Well, they asked for that exemption. They're not a church, but they are an organization that allows the food shelf to be present there. So I think that is one of the reasons that we do allow that to happen.
I think David could answer that.
Oh, David. Okay, yeah, David, do you want to speak to that?
So, yeah, in defense of the Masonic building, I just want to say that it's basically a pillar of the village of Enosburgh Falls. And over the last 3 or 4 years, the Masons and a lot of local volunteers have spent a lot of time and a lot of money making that building look fairly decent. And, from my point of view, I think it's a great deal if we can get a tax exemption for a few years. And also, as you say, we allow the food shelf to be there, and that's a good thing also.
Yeah. Dennis, do you have any other questions, or is that?
Just another point to the temple too, like Pierre just wanted to bring it up. It's also like the town clock there too.
Sure.
I want to say one other thing. So we've done a lot of work on the windows, and we have restored the windows, all the windows on the south side. And coming up this coming year, we're going to do all the windows on the west side. And It's true that we've received a couple of grants for that purpose, but both grants have been a 50-50 match. So it's cost the Masons a fair amount of money to do that project.
So there seems to be a couple things in the chat going back to the town clerk's office, the current town clerk's office. Dan Steiner had stated that, which is true, the fact that it was deeded to the town for a municipal office only makes it pretty much unsellable. We can't sell it. And so that we just dropped that point. Brenda Stanley talking to about whether to remove that building or not. So the library also needs lawn space for programs and a welcome area for people to work outside. So it could be a combination green space parking area. I mean, it's tons of parking and picnic options. But of course, that would be a conversation as that decision was being made. Let's see.
Charging stations.
Oh, yeah, Lisa, let's see. I would like to live in a town where the library is visible from the street instead of hidden. Yes, you know, that little library sits in the back. A lot of people don't even know it's there, but it's a beautiful library. We need a public electric car charging stations and power storage also. That's a great point, actually.
I think the
John.
village got a grant that a year or so ago from the state. I don't know where that is.
Where
at this
that is.
point.
I was thinking that too, you know, with all the commercials, with the electric cars, I was like, oh, where would you even do that in Enosburgh? But,
Maybe the parking lot.
oh, maybe the parking lot.
I do know there is an inquiry about, not public, but there is, at the Jolly store, there's been some talk about some quick charge in addition to some slower charging stations that are slated to happen soon.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
so-
So it sounds like
Yeah.
it's in the works or in the conversation at least. And I agree the Masonic Hall should be preserved and appreciate all the hard work. Yeah, we do too. The amount of work that's gone on there. The painting, it looks gorgeous. We thank you for that, for sure. It would be a good place for a public playground. Us with small kids can't use the school playground. I know when I had small kids, I found myself putting them in the car, going all over the place to look for a playground. There is, so you're exactly right. The rec center has a master plan that the emergency services building here, the recreation field. They've been, the rec director, Yvonne Keogh, our previous one, and the rec committee have been working on a master plan in order to update our rec fields, and part of that was a playground.
And if you were to look on page 11, it'd be there.
Oh, page 11 in the book exactly has the rec committee's write-up and a picture. So yes, that also is in part of the great grand vision. You know, Ward talked about having a vision, looking forward, and there are definitely things in this town that are looking forward. And now you just have to take the steps to get there. Has anyone considered, Dan said, has anyone considered turning it into an artist space? A municipal artist space? I don't know. We haven't talked about that. Great idea though. Oh, Lizzie Button says we never received a book this year.
If she comes to vote tomorrow, I'll have extras with me, or I can mail her one.
Okay, did you hear that, Lizzie, that she can either mail you one, or you can, if you come vote, you can grab one. Oh, Heather just posted a link in the chat for the Park for All, which also gives you kind of a picture of the master plan. It's a good one. Are there, oh, here we go. Whoa. Let's see. Speaking to the grant, writing going from a position to a freelance line item, I wonder if some leadership could be requested for town and village organizations to get together with Greta, someone else from NRPC to teach orgs how to find grants and make a schedule of asking for grants. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. You can always reach out to the Northwest Regional Planning Commission too, and they can tell you. But yes, I think that would be noted for sure. I also know that Northwest Regional Planning Commission, they also have workshops too. If you check out their website page, they have workshops about those very things. Let's see.
Need my bigger glasses.
Sorry, guys, I'm trying to think.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So let's see.
I just
Oh,
went-
I didn't know you could do that.
I can do it really, but I just was trying to keep everything all on one screen, so.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's see, especially as a village grant request, it will take forever to get approval from them, and you and back and forth will be a lot of time and effort. Yep, that's why having a plan makes sense. Yeah, sometimes, you know, people just show up on the 11th hour and say, I have a grant, and that doesn't fly. Like sometimes it actually, you have to plan ahead and make it so that it sometimes goes from the village to the town. It's not an easy process, but sometimes that has to happen. If you can figure out who your applicant is it the town or the village, go directly to those entities, ask their permission, they give you the green light, then you go to the grant writer and say, can we get this grant written?
And even after you get a grant, it's also could take some time. Just take the salt shed, for instance, we've had that grant 5 years, and we've added on to those grants, and it's still not built.
Sorry, Shauna, didn't mean to confuse. We don't have a grant writer, the freelance, whoever the freelance grant writer is.
Heather shared her hand up as well.
Oh, Heather, yes.
Yeah, thanks. So I just kind of wanted to piggyback, Paul, you kind of said some of what I was going to say with the grant writing and needing a plan. It also goes back to what Ward said. Sometimes, speaking from experience, the pre-planning is challenging just because timelines don't always match up. So like having a really clear system of which board to go to and when and how it's going to be decided if the grant is going to be sought after, as well as if we can get a really good vision of like our 5, 10, 15-year plan so that we can know what to go out for long-term grants, because some of them you have to start before they are even open. I wrote a $550,000 grant recently, and I spent 120 hours of documented time, but really 2 years of mental preparation for this grant because it was pretty big, and it was a multi-year grant. So just kind of lending in that perspective, and if we, thinking about like the parking lot and then the Vital Village project, and how would a parking lot fit with the Vital Village project, which I don't recall many conversations about thinking of that necessarily as part of the what the engineers created for us. Like that wasn't one of the models. So just kind of, and if would be looking for grants to fund those, somebody needs to be seeking those grants out now, and also making sure that our organizations are not in competition. There's been a couple of grants that I've not sought because I thought another organization was applying for them, and if we're in competition for the grants amongst ourselves, it doesn't look good for us, and we could all lose out. So just kind of my perspective on the complexity of setting us up to be successful to receive grants.
Absolutely. Thanks, Heather. Any other questions? Those are all good ones.
Sean Peel.
Oh, he asked for Sean. Ellen answered. Thanks, Ellen. You're all set?
So
Okay. Well, don't forget to go out and vote tomorrow, and like we said, hopefully town meeting next year. And thank you all for joining. That was a valuable conversation.
I definitely miss the town meeting. To have the regular town meeting. This is, for me, it's 3 years. I missed the one just before the
Oh,
pandemic,
right, that's right.
so it's kind of
Thanks,
strange.
Dennis. Thank you all. My last meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Polly.
Polly.
Thank you, Polly.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.